right, we're joined now by the chairman of the Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reforms, Taiwo Oyedele. Thanks for joining us tonight. Before we go into other discussions, I just wanted to ask you, with the increased revenue resulting from fuel subsidy removal and such substantial amount at stake, accountability comes into play, especially state governments, local governments. What sort of mechanisms can be put in place to make sure that these funds are utilized for what they're supposed to be used for?
Yeah, thank you very much. So that's a very important question around accountability. And, really, you can put the challenges we have with the revenue system into three buckets. The first one is how you impose taxes that you collect. The second one is how you collect it. And the third one, perhaps the most important, is how you spend it. And for all three of them, you need accountability and transparency. So what we have seen in the past couple of months have been significant increases in the amount of revenue available for sharing at FAC, driven by two major reasons. One is the subsidy removal on petrol. That would be adding somewhere in the region of 300 to 400 billion monthly that would have been lost to the subsidy. The second one, which also was shown in your introductory review, is the FX subsidy removal. So they've called it exchange gain because you budgeted for $1 at about 460, and now it's around 800. So that extra amount, it's a gain that is available for them to share, about 280 something billion naira for the last FAC sharing. So all of these are pointing to one particular direction. And that direction is that the Nigerian people are making more sacrifices because that money did not just appear from heaven, right? And therefore, government has to compensate that by ensuring that that money is not only spent for the people, the priority of spending has to be what is most important to the most vulnerable people. Particularly if you look at the multidimensional poverty index, you see things like basic education, healthcare, quality of living. Yeah, so they're not going to, the moon. They're not those kind of things that are there. And then the priority and the quality of spending. So it has to be that it's able to actually overcompensate for the sacrifices that are being made. I know it will take time. It won't happen immediately. But we want that time between when we start making the sacrifices and when we begin to get the result to be as short as possible.
Very well. Your insight has been very interesting. I was coming to the multidimensional poverty. I wanted to start with the local government autonomy. But then, since you mentioned multidimensional poverty, maybe I should just start from there. State governors have been accused of not doing enough to address multidimensional poverty with the allocation they get. So then, how can we, as citizens, push for more responsiveness from these state governors so that they can better reach the grassroots where the multidimensional poverty is more prevalent?
Yes, so I would say that in terms of addressing multidimensional poverty, in terms of priority of impact, I would actually start with the local government, then I'll go to state, then I'll go to the federal government.
Right.
Unfortunately, in Nigeria, the way we focus our energy is the other way around. So there's more attention paid to the federal government, then state, then local government, right? We need to balance that. Every level of government needs to be accountable. They need to be transparent. So what we need to do first is to show more interest. And it's good that you guys are talking about this, for example. So the more of us that are talking about it, the more the politicians will pay attention, even if they don't agree, right? So, and then there's a bit of education that is required. Many of our people, unfortunately, particularly below the middle class, which is where you find majority of our people, they feel like it's a favor when you do something for them, right? You see a governor will tell you, I'm going to build this, I just did that. You feel like as if they were spending their personal money, right?
Right.
Compare that to, say, the UK. You go and fix road and you're commissioning it, you're going to answer very tough questions. Why are you commissioning it? Why should I celebrate you
and you
for...
spend money
to do commissioning. Yeah. You could have spent that to do something else. Someone is even asking you whether that's the right quality, whether you did it on time. In fact, I read a few years back when some people sued their local government to say, because not only was it that their cars got damaged, they wanted compensation for that. They said they went through emotional trauma because they ran into potholes. That is very fundamental into turning our stories around from where we are now to where we need to be.
Talking about doing things on time, you're chairing this committee that has a 12-month mandate to achieve 18% tax to GDP ratio within 12 months. Amongst other things. What are some of the strategies that will be put in place to make sure that this is achieved within this time frame? And also, by the time the work is done, do you foresee further increase in revenue for Nigeria as well?
Yeah, great question. So as of the end of 2021, because the number for 2022 is not out yet, the tax to GDP ratio recalculated was 10.86% for Nigeria. Now, if you look at Africa, the average tax to GDP ratio is 16%. If you take out Nigeria from Africa and you recalculate that average, it's 18%. So the question is, why can't Nigeria just get to Africa's average? That's where we got 18% from. Now, we're not hoping to get to 18% in 12 months. That would be unrealistic. So while the work of my committee is divided into 3 milestones over a period of 1 year, the result will continue. So the 18% target is in the next 3 years. Now, to the other part of your question, where do we expect this magic to come from? Because it seems like a contradiction. On one hand, we are saying there are too many taxes, this committee is going to reduce them, eliminate so many of them, yet we want to collect more. Here is where we think the money will come from. Number one, we have a huge tax gap, which is the difference between what you're collecting and what you should be collecting, even as of today. And the bulk of that, almost 99%, are coming and should come from less than 10 taxes. So if we repeal 50 different taxes, by the way, local government has about 21 levies and taxes assigned to them, yet they're poor, right? Maybe they need only one, property tax, and they'll collect 10 times what they are collecting today. So there are people who are supposed to be paying who are not paying. The burden of tax compliance and funding government in Nigeria has been disproportionately on the poorest people. It is not right. When we did VADES in 2016, Voluntary Asset and Income Declaration Scheme, the vice president who was acting as the president at the time said on record, 96% of income collected through personal income tax was PAYE.
Yes,
rich people don't pay PAYE, right?
Yes.
In South Africa, the top 1% pays more than the bottom 99%. This is a pattern you find everywhere. So we need to now start shifting that burden of tax compliance to where it needs to be. We're hoping that we even increase the exemption to protect the vulnerable people and small businesses.
Okay, we'll still explore that a little more. But then let's look at the Joint Tax Board. How can the state government cooperate with the local government authorities to ensure that the Joint Tax Board functions effectively as to bring in more revenue for the state and, of course, the local governments?
Yeah, fantastic. So the Joint Tax Board as of today is not a revenue collecting organ. So it's more like an association, put it simply. So it's the association of the State Internal Revenue Services, the Federal Internal Revenue Service, Nigerian Customs Service, Immigration, and then representation from local government. What we envisage and that we plan to do is to reestablish the Joint Tax Board in a different format where it will play a more important role in setting the fiscal policy direction for Nigeria.
Right.
That's what is most important. And then be able to almost like whip people in line to comply with those policies, whether they are local government or state or federal.
Right.
Now, but to your question really is, how do you make sure that you're able to mobilize more revenue? So we think that's going to be difficult under the current format because the burden of tax is placed at the wrong places. for people who really don't have so much more to give than they have been giving all along. So we think we're going to start by redesigning it and then use a lot of technology and intelligence to collect the tax. I don't see any country that is doing well with their revenue system where they are appealing to your conscience and begging you, right? They use data. So there are countries where they say, boy, don't bother filing your returns. So I know everything about you. I just need you to confirm and pay your tax, right? And we have the technology in Nigeria as of today. So anybody that has a mobile phone, it doesn't have to be smart. It's already within the system. In fact, if you do that very well, the data and intelligence you collect can help you administer social conditional transfer effectively. Yeah. Your behavior on your phone, and I've said that many times, if you load 50 naira a whole month and you're flashing people up and down, I don't need any other data to know that you're poor. You get the alert on your phone, even if you don't have a bank account. I can make it a food stamp so that the only thing you can use that money for is to buy food. And you can audit it 100%. So the work we have to do, people need to see it beyond just raising revenue. This is about economic management. It's about planning our people and dealing with issues that have faced us for so many years.
All right, before we let you go, one concern that's really unfortunate, often raised, is how these revenues are used for political gain rather than public welfare. Some can say that, look, the state governments have received increased revenue last month, this month as well. What can be done to make sure that these monies are not squandered, as we always see in Nigeria?
Yeah, it's sad. It's painful for those of us who try our best to pay our taxes correctly at the right time, and you now see 1 billion here. It's almost like it means nothing to some of these politicians. It's sad, it's painful, but the solution to it is not to stop paying taxes and the system will collapse. It's to fix how the money is being spent. I think what we need to do, first and foremost, is to demand accountability. So, for example, the information is out there about what has been shared to each of the states. Somebody should pick it up and say, this is how it's being spent. So the more...
Follow the money.
Yes, just follow the money. So the likes of budget, and I really commend them. So they'll put data there about projects that are not being done, abandoned here. Nigerians are not even paying attention. So sometimes you see 15 likes. I say, imagine that you have maybe 1 million shares and like. Anybody and everybody that is important in Nigeria will pay attention to that data. So Nigerians also have a role to play in changing this narrative.
Okay, very quickly, just before you go, are they going to be publishing in the pages of the newspapers, just like Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala used to do, how much goes to these state governors?
We don't have the mandate to publish what has been shared.
Okay.
So we are trying to create a framework for how that should be done. So once we create that framework, some of our work will require that we enact into law, in fact, amending the constitution as well, so that whatever we do is institutionalized and is therefore sustainable. So, but in the meantime, publishing it, I think it's a good measure, but people need to show interest after those things have been published.
Thank you so much for your insights with us here on Newsnight. That's Taiwo Oyedele, Chairman, Presidential Committee on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform.